So Proverbs 21, we'll read the whole chapter. It's 31 verses. Proverbs 21, verse 1. The king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of Yahweh. He turns it wherever he pleases. Every man's way is right in his own eyes, but Yahweh weighs the hearts. To do righteousness and justice is chosen by Yahweh over sacrifice. Haughty eyes and a proud heart, the fallow ground of the wicked, are all sin. The thoughts of the diligent lead surely to profit, but everyone who is hasty comes surely to poverty. Working for treasures by a lying tongue is a fleeting breath by those who pursue death. The destruction of the wicked will drag them away because they refuse to do justice. The way of a guilty man is perverse, but as for the pure, his work is upright. It is better to live in the corner of a roof than in the house shared with a contentious woman. The soul of the wicked craves evil. His neighbor finds no favor in his eyes. When the scoffer is punished, the simple becomes wise, and when one considers wisdom, he receives knowledge. The righteous one considers the house of the wicked, turning the wicked to ruin. He who shuts his ear to the outcry of the poor will himself also call and not be answered. A gift in secret subdues anger, and a bribe in the bosom strong wrath. To do justice is pleasure for the righteous, but is ruin to the workers of iniquity. A man who wanders from the way of insight will rest in the assembly of the dead. He who loves pleasure will become a poor man, and he who loves wine and oil will not become rich. The wicked is a ransom for the righteous, and the treacherous is in the place of the upright. It is better to live in a desert land than with a contentious and vexing woman. There is desirable treasure and oil in the abode of the wise, but a foolish man swallows it up. He who pursues righteousness and lovingkindness finds life, righteousness, and glory. A wise man goes up to the city of the mighty and brings down the stronghold in which they trust. He who keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps his soul from troubles. Arrogance, haughty, scoffer are his names, who acts with arrogant fury. The desire of the sluggard puts him to death, for his hand refuses to work. All day long he is insatiably craving, while the righteous gives and does not hold back. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. How much more when he brings it with a wicked scheme? A false witness will perish, but the man who listens will speak forever. A wicked man displays a brazen face, but as for the upright, he establishes his way. There is no wisdom, there is no discernment, and there is no counsel against Yahweh. The horse is set for the day of battle, but salvation belongs to Yahweh. Thus concludes the reading of God's word. So, Proverbs 21, unlike last week, there are no direct commands in this passage. Last week we saw 6. This week doesn't have any direct commands, so that is a little different. Actually, it probably has more to say about chapter 20 than it does necessarily about chapter 21. The norm is that there aren't a whole lot of commands in the Proverbs. There are things implied, which we will certainly get to today, but no direct commands. And I mention that because we always, if there's a command in the passage, the point of the passage is to obey the command. All right, everything else is either a precursor or an explanation or whatever. So you understand that. Getting on with it today, I'm just going to tell you we're going to spend a lot of time talking about work. We're going to talk a lot about work today. And maybe you see that as we're going through, maybe you don't, but let's highlight some of these things. Verses 4 through 8. And again, Proverbs almost never groups things all together. They're just kind of scattered about, and it just is what it is. So verse 4, haughty eyes and a proud heart, the fallow ground of the wicked are sin. So it's saying 3 things are sin. What are the 3 things that are sin?
Haughty eyes, proud heart,
and fallow ground. And the fallow ground of the wicked, yeah. So haughty eyes and a proud heart essentially are the same thing. What does it mean to have haughty eyes? What's haughty? Do you have a different translation? Yeah, arrogance. Yeah, do you have a different translation? Brad, you get it?
No, mine's haughty.
It says haughty. Okay, yeah. So it's arrogance and pride, right? There is a. I always used to struggle with this. I can remember my high school coach saying, out on the football field, have a little pride, I mean, it was like, kind of this is who we are and this is what we do, kind of thing. And there is a sense in which, that's okay. That's a good thing to have a sense of identity and who you are. And this is what we stand for and this is how we do things. But that's not what's being talked about here. Haughty eyes and a proud heart. What's he talking about? Somebody who thinks too much of himself, who thinks that he's always right, thinks his way is always better. And so the arrogant, and in this case, verse 4, the fallow ground of the wicked. What is fallow ground? Tainted. Fallow, huh? Unplowed. It's unprepared. Yeah, fallow. If you let the ground lie fallow, what you did is you didn't plow it, you didn't work the ground. Okay, and so you're just living off of previous successes or prior harvest, or you're assuming that what's happened before will happen again, even though there has been no input put into what's going on. And so fallow implies that there should be someone who was to do what? To plow the ground, and they didn't work. They didn't plow the ground. Let me just say it more clearly. Laziness is sin. We've said that 100 times. All right, we're saying it again. Being lazy, letting what you are responsible for not get done, is arrogant and lazy, and all are what? Sin. It's sinful to be lazy. Good googly moogly, our culture needs to hear this today. Okay, let me say this because I know the audience I'm dealing with here. Okay, this is generally not directed at you guys because I know how you are. Many of us in here, I think our tendency will be to overwork, right? And so you need to be careful about that. And how do you determine what's overwork and what's not work enough? We could have a discussion about that maybe at some other time. But generally, the idea that people do need to work. They absolutely need to work. Work is a good thing. We've talked about this 100 times. God is working. Men should be working. It's part of the cultural mandate that displays the Imago Dei. Golly, it seems like I keep beating this drum lately. I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just the texts that we're dealing with on Sunday and Monday. But what does it mean to be created in the image of God according to Genesis 1? It doesn't have to do with volition. It doesn't have to do with intelligence. Those are common explanations of what it means to be created in the image of God and separate from the animal kingdom. That's not what Genesis 1 is talking about. We are separate from the animal kingdom in the sense that we rule over the animal kingdom. We rule over everything else. We exercise dominion. That's what Genesis 1 is talking about. The Imago Dei in Genesis 1 has to do with ruling and reigning. It has to do with exercising God's rule and reign over the planet. I've said this before. Go right across the street over there, right? What does that look like over there? It's the freaking wilderness, man, okay? The curse is living and active over there, and it takes the curse breaker and the curse pusher backers, right? That's us, to tame, rule, cultivate the land, all of that stuff. That's what men do, and that is a good thing. I think about this every time. So we're getting ready to go to Florida, and for 6 months out of the year, the house gets used and abused, and people are coming and going, and that's fine. That's just part of it, right? That's what we're doing with this STR, short-term rental deal, right? But there is something that gets fired up in me when I get there because when the owner shows up, things change. When the curse breaker, when the guy is pushing back the curse, exercising dominion over his home, what happens? The walls get painted, the light fixture gets fixed, right? That squeaky that knob on the cabinet gets tightened, right? All of those little things, the yard that has rocks that are thrown in it because of the way the driveways, those get pushed back into the driveway, right? There's 100 little things that I, as the owner, notice and care about that I take care of. Why? Because it's mine. Because it's an investment. It needs to look right. It needs to be right. I think ahead. Okay, if I put this cover on this grill and the wind comes out, what's going to happen? What's the point of all this? Fallow ground. If I just say, well, it'll be fine, and we all have been either to hotels or properties, or you've been to maybe even a shopping center before, and it's completely unmaintained. There's cracks all in the parking lot. There's crap growing up everywhere. The eaves are unpainted. You can tell it's weathered and it's starting to rot. It's not maintained. It's not taken care of. The ground is fallow. That's what's going on here. Paying attention to all of these things and getting after it, having a sense of urgency and a sense of drivenness is a good thing. Laziness is sin. It's prohibited. In addition to that, not only should men be working diligently and joyfully to the glory of God, and that's really important. It's important that your aim is not just to, well, this is my property and I'm, it's chest thumping, puffed out kind of thing, but that you're doing it, why? To the glory of God. You're doing it to fulfill the cultural mandate, whether you're, building a house or working on plans or you're fixing boilers or, whatever the case may be, you're doing it to the glory of God. Men should be working diligently to the glory of God, complaining. I'm going to get in your business here, all right? Complaining is arrogance. If you're complaining about the situation, notice what it says. Haughty eyes and a proud heart, like the fallow ground, those are sin. If it's in the context of work, and we're going to just lump it in there for our purposes this morning, complaining about work and not working are certainly not the same thing, right? Is one worse than the other? Of course it is, right? Not going to work and constantly calling in and just, being a slack dog, like that's worse, right? And not understanding the difference in category, that's a problem which we'll get into here in just a minute. But complaining and not working, although they're not the same, they're still both sin. Complaining about your job, complaining about your boss, complaining about the situation, they're both sin. Doesn't mean you can't raise concerns. It doesn't mean that given the opportunity you can't do things differently. However, it does mean that we should take responsibility for the things that we can control and trust God with the things that we can't. There are some things that you can control. The problem is that we want control that we don't have, and we don't want the control that we do have. We need sound judgment to understand and accept the difference between the two. Complaining without trying to be part of the solution is immature and boyish and selfish. I'll say that again. It's boyish to bitch, moan, and complain all the time and be that guy. It's boyish. Stop it. Don't do it. Stop complaining. I used to had this experience where I don't know why, but some people are just prone to complaining, right? They're just negative Nellies all the time or whatever. First of all, don't be that person. Don't tolerate that in your family either, right? Don't it just can't be. I used to tell people all the time, they'd come to my office and they start complaining about something, well, we've got this going on, this, and generally it was something to do with our, with what we were doing. And I would stop them short and I would say, hey, the complaint department's down the hall. And they would look at me because my office was the last one on the hall. I said, do you have any solutions? Any monkey can point out problems. That's not a skill. Okay? It's just not. Everybody sees the cracks in the roads. Everybody sees traffic. That's not a skill. Everybody knows that there's these hang-ups or the line's too long or whatever, right? That's not a skill. Creating solutions is a skill. Work hard in the area that you have responsible for. Keep your mind and your work. I don't want to say this. I messed up the sentence. Let me just say this. Pay attention to what you have control over, and the things that you don't, hand that over to God. If you have occasion to move up or take responsibility or to affect change, so be it. Good. That's fine. If not, be faithful where you are. Otherwise, the arrogant attitude will consume you and steal all your joy. It's been said comparison's a joy thief. Also, complaining is a joy thief. Right? And it's cancerous. It snowballs. It always escalates. It just affects the whole attitude and mood. And it's sin. It's arrogance. It's immature, and it's sin. So, don't. Right? Also, see verse 1. What's verse 1 say? The king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord, or Yahweh. He turns it wherever he pleases. The king's heart, God is in control. This is what it's basically saying here. Right? He is sovereign. There are some things that God has not given us dominion over. He's given that dominion to somebody else. We all have rulers, whether they be bosses or customers or suppliers or even the civil magistrate. And I don't like any of those, okay? I'll just tell you, all right? It grates against me, that independent, strong-minded will, whatever. But we all have those people. We've all got them, and God's put them in our lives. And what do we need to do? We need to submit. We don't always like the way things are going, but we've got to accept the things that we can't control. We can't get high-centered on people and situations that we have no influence over. Can you lead from behind? Many times you can. There's a way of going about that. And, to the extent that you have the opportunity to do that, do it. Pray and work hard. Take care of your business. Be faithful with the things that God has put you in charge of. What does Jesus say? To him who is faithful with a little, he'll be given more. But if you're not faithful with what you have, you should have no expectation that that's going to change. Right? You don't be faithful so that it will change. You be faithful because God's called you to be faithful. Right? It does take a level of judgment to know. That doesn't mean that you have to stay in an abusive or a bad situation at work, or if there's not a better opportunity that you can't take it or something like that. That's not what we're saying. We're just talking about the general attitude, and you all get that. Work hard, right? Work hard in the area that God's given you, and the place and the things that you're not responsible for. Congratulations, you're not responsible for that. You don't have to answer to God for things that you're not responsible for. Congratulations. So you don't have to complain about it. Verse 5. The thoughts of the diligent surely lead to profit, but everyone who is hasty surely comes to poverty. The thoughts of the diligent surely lead to profit. What's this verse essentially saying?
It's kind of about playing the long game. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I like that.
The plans. It says the plans.
Yeah, how does yours say it?
The plans of the diligent.
The plans of the diligent surely lead to profit, but everyone...
This is abundance. Surely leads to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty.
Okay. So thoughts, plans, what's the push here? You don't just need to work hard. You need to persevere and work smartly, intentionally, on purpose, with planning, with diligence, with thoughtfulness, right? Hasty, get-rich-quick schemes. How does that turn out? Not good. Leads to poverty. Okay, those things that promise stupid returns. If something sounds too good to be true, it is. There's a reason for that, right? Careful consideration should be given to investments. Be diligent in your research. Vet potential partners with prejudice. With prejudice. You can exercise prejudice. You use, and I'm not saying because they are a different skin color. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about use your past experience or be suspicious of people claiming to have extraordinary returns and things like that. It just doesn't work. Things don't go that way. Let me say it another way. Investments are never easy, right? Making money is never, There are times where God gives, because of timing and, providence and whatever it may be, are there times that, you get maybe some extraordinary returns that can happen over time, if you do that long enough. But if somebody's promising that on the front end, that's usually unexpected. Okay. It's unexpected. That's an unexpected gift. It's not something you should plan on. So work hard, work smart. The thoughts of the diligent lead to profit. The plans of the diligent thoughts. Thinking is work. It's hard work. Spending time sorting through, whiteboarding it out, doing pro and con lists, thinking rationally, getting counsel, talking it over with your wife, finding people who are actually qualified to give counsel about a particular thing. All of that is to be done and should be thought through carefully. I'm not going to get too spicy on this, but boy, I sure do wish I had some of the money that I have invested in stupid things. And boy, do I wish I would have vetted some partners. There was a guy that came out with a video just this week about how he lost $33 million of other people's money.
Oh, other people.
Yeah. 30 grand of that was mine. Yeah. Yeah. Ouch. Well, I sure do wish I had that money right now. I'll tell you. Right. We did what we thought was good at the time, but let me tell you something. I've learned a lesson. I learned it the hard way. I paid some tuition that I shouldn't have had to pay. Right. There's a better way of doing that. Right. And that's just I'm telling you that not to. I'm just telling you that to. I've made that mistake. Think through things well. Work hard, think hard. Verses 6 through 8, moving on with this whole work theme, have to do with motive. Okay, has to do with ethics. Verse 6: working for treasures by a lying tongue is a fleeting breath by those who pursue death. How you work is important. Not just that you work, but how you work. In other words, ethics matter. People talk about business ethics, which is funny to me that people want to talk about business ethics, because business ethics are just ethics. All right, ethics are just ethics. There's no business ethics is not a subcategory, right? It's not like there's two different standards, and lying is also, and when I don't know who mentioned it, maybe Ryan, is short-term thinking. Pragmatically, lying. What happens if you lie to people long enough?
They'll start believing.
Yeah, okay. If you lie to a whole bunch of different people over time, you develop a reputation as a liar, as an untrustworthy person. And what happens? Well, people don't trust you anymore, and therefore things don't work out. It's short-term thinking. Lying is always short. Pragmatically, it just doesn't work. Lying to get ahead, ultimately, and this is what I think the verse is talking about, leads to death. You see that at the very end of verse 6? It says, working for treasures by a lying tongue is a fleeting breath by those who pursue death. So what is it that they're pursuing?
Treasures.
Yeah. That's not what it says, though. They're working for treasures, but they are pursuing, at the very last part.
Oh, death.
Yeah. So you point out something good there, Tony, though. And it's this. They think they're pursuing treasures. They think they're pursuing wealth. They think they're pursuing money. But the end of it is death. Yeah. It's a trap. You see that?
Yeah,
it's a trap.
It's a snare of death.
A snare of death. There it is. All right. I didn't know that was the translation. I hadn't looked at the ESV. So yeah, that tracks perfectly. All right. It's a snare of death. You think you're pursuing one thing, but that's the bait. And you see kind of the spiritual implications of this. Lying to get ahead leads to death. That is sin's pattern. It always leads to death. It always overpromises, deceives. It overpromises and underdelivers. Death is the payment for sin. We know that you're probably familiar with Romans 3:23, right? The wages of sin. What does sin pay? The wages of sin is death. And it's an inescapable certainty. That's the way it always is. So, working for treasures by a lying tongue. In other words, lying to get ahead. What does it lead to? Well, it may actually work out. By the way, you know this, right? We all know people who have lied and gotten ahead. Yeah, it happens. It happens all the time. The implication behind this is that God sees. And whether pragmatically in this world or in the age to come, what happens? It's death. Where do liars go? Hell. That's the very quick. Thank you, Brad. That's it. Yeah, liars go to hell. I mean, you could just say that. All right. Paul talks about these categories of people whose lifestyles are characterized by certain things, and that's where it goes. It's an inescapable reality. Verse 7. So we're talking about motive here. Motive when it comes to work. The destruction of the wicked will drive them away because they refuse to do justice. The destruction of the wicked will drag them away. Somebody have another translation? How does yours read?
The violence of the wicked will sweep them away because they refuse to do what is just.
Okay, the violence. Okay. You have another one, Bobby?
No, it's pretty close to that.
Yeah. Okay. So, verse 7, because people refuse to do justice, the way that I was thinking about this, yours says violence, which is kind of an interesting take on this, not dealing with people with gentleness. When I think of doing justice, I think of making things right, doing right. And so, in this case, destruction drags them away like a slave. The way I was thinking about it is the willful neglect of righteousness. This speaks directly to business ethics or ethics. It's not okay to do something evil and to excuse it by saying it's just business. You ever hear that phrase? And it's like this. It's like an accepted form of evil. Well, we can screw these people over, or I can lie to you, or I had an opportunity to make money, but to do it, I had to do something evil, something perhaps even violent, something that's not just, something not right. I'm not doing justice. Instead, I'm doing the opposite of justice. I'm doing injustice. But hey, it's just business. Don't get offended by it. It's just business. Business is always personal. It's not personal. It's just business. Oh, really? Because I bet the reason you're doing it is personal. I wanted to say something. I'm not going to say it because we're recording. But I just SOB, like you sorry sucker, right? You're willing to forego your integrity and the good of the situation. It absolutely is personal. And you just don't want me to get mad about it. How about I relocate your nose to the side of your face and just say it's just business, right? It's just business, right? It's not personal. Verse 7: the destruction of the wicked will drag them away because they refuse to do justice. What is the outcome of that? They're going to establish a reputation over time, and eventually it's going to catch up with them. Verse 8, the way of the guilty man is perverse. Perverse, do you have another translation there? Crooked. Yeah, that's twisted and crooked. Literally, that's what perverse means. Perverse just means twist. Like when we say, oh, that's really twisted. The fact that we use that as a euphemism is it's taking something straight, that's straightforward, that makes sense to you, and what are you doing it? You misrepresent it, you twist it, you change its appearance, you do something weird with it, right? And so, verse 8, the way of the guilty man is twisted or crooked or perverse, but for the pure, his work is upright. You see this? Well, it's a beautiful dichotomy. The motives and methods of a condemned man are twisted. Conversely, the one uncontaminated by the world, by worldly desires, is above board, or to say it more clearly, he's straight up. The opposite of twisted is straight. There's a reason we use that term for sexuality. I'm serious. There's a reason we use that term to talk about heterosexual. It's straight. Because the opposite is perverse. That's not what they're talking about here, but it's talking about generally when it comes to ethics. This speaks directly, we already talked about that, I'm going to see if I can say this without it becoming too weird. The one uncontaminated by worldly desires is above board or straight up. It says that his work is, how is his work? What does it say?
Pure.
Okay, yours says pure.
The conduct of the pure is upright.
Is upright. How is it? His conduct is upright as opposed to
Down wrong.
down wrong. Bent over. He's standing upright as opposed to bent over. Right? Euphemistically, right? He's not bending people over, and he's upright. Right? We use the terms "people get screwed." Right? We use that as a way of saying that they were done unjustly. Right? That's what we mean by that. Right? And we use kind of the slang and stuff like that, but it is kind of a vulgar thing that happens to people. Right? They get taken advantage of, they get screwed over, they get lied to, all this kind of stuff. It's twisted, it's perverse, and it's not a big jump to have these sexual overtones that go to that, right? Both of these things are wicked. They're wrong, and it's not good. And so the methods and the motives of this wicked man, they're perverse, they're twisted. He bends people over instead of standing upright and being straight up. Being plain spoken about these things. Verse 17. So we're talking about motives and things like that when it comes to work. He who loves pleasure will become a poor man, and he who loves wine and oil will not become rich. So you see the dichotomy between, or the converse relationship between the poor and the rich, and what is Proverbs saying about the difference between the two. That the poor man, what does he love? This is a matter of loves, preferences. What does he love? Pleasure. You love pleasure and you will become poor. If you love, he goes on to say the one who loves oil and wine, or wine and oil. Wine and oil in their situation. I mean, certainly it applies to our situation as well. But those are things of extravagance, right? Things of pleasure, things of, hey man, just take it easy, go easy. To love comfort, ease, and alcohol will not make you comfortable or make life easy. That's the irony of it. To love comfort does not make life comfortable. He gives up, in a stroke of irony, it'll make you uncomfortable in the long run. To love comfort will make you uncomfortable in the long run. Life will be difficult, not easy. Loving the wrong thing will not deliver what it promises. Instead, it'll just make you poor. Leave you empty. Another way of saying is it leads to death. Just another example of that. It's the irony. Have you all seen that meme or that illustration about making easy choices now leads to a hard life later, or making hard choices now leads to an easy life later? And it's talking about, particularly with young people. Have you seen that? I don't know, maybe if I can find the meme, I'll send it out. But the way we always talked about it with our kids, particularly with Jet, and when I talked about like career choices and stuff, I said, you can pay your dues when you're young, or you can be paying them for the rest of your life. I said, my dad certainly did a ton of things that were good examples of what not to do, which he would have readily admitted. One of the things I can remember him grabbing me pretty early on and saying, you can work with your head and you can work with your hands, and they're both fine. You need to do both at a minimum, and preferably work with your head if you can. I was thinking about how the year before he died, he was still working 12 to 14-hour days, and on the main line, he drove a train. On the main line, sometimes it would be 120, 130 degrees outside in the summertime because the heat radiates off the rocks that are on the tracks, plus the engine, and he did it. He busted his hump, And to his credit, he had a very strong work ethic. but he was still paying his dues 42 years later. He was still paying his dues because he made poor decisions when he was a young man. He made poor decisions when he was a young man. So I told Jed, I said, look, pay your dues now. Pay them when you're young. Work like a crazy person when you're young so that you can, over time, you still want to work hard. Okay, I'm not saying don't work hard. But if you work smart and work hard when you're young, you're in a better spot. You'll get what I'm going at. This is very clear to me. Who works harder, the law student or the construction worker? It's a trick question. Don't answer it. Okay. They both work really hard. Which works harder, the med school student or the guy out making a hand in the oil field? Right. Both of those things are fine. They're completely fine, but it's a different lifestyle. Right. It has different outcomes. And so what is this? What are we getting at? What are we talking about here? There are those who love comfort and ease, and they want to take it easy now and go easy and have the college experience or just party or whatever when they're young, or they want to keep doing that and they keep having to start over again. And that's why people who are in their 40s and who are working entry-level jobs when they should at this point have 20 years of experience doing something and be a subject matter expert, right? Those who love comfort and ease, that comfort and ease will lead to discomfort and pain. That's the idea. Alcohol is notorious for doing this. If you love the bottle, what's it going to do? It's going to kill you. It's going to kill you, right? So be careful about it. Verse 25 and 26. The desire of the sluggard puts him to death, for his hands refuse to work. Well, that's pretty simple, right? The desire of the sluggard is going to kill him. What does he want? I just want to take a nap. I just want to do, his hands refuse to work. So guess what? You starve to death, you sorry sucker. All day long, he is insatiably craving. I'm so hungry. I want something better. I must be nice. Must be nice to have whatever, right? That's what they say. Well, you're not willing to do what had to be done in order to get the money to do the thing, to buy the property or to buy the whatever, fill in the blank. While the righteous, notice the flip side of this, the righteous gives and does not hold back. This is a great segue to where we're going next. What does the righteous do? Well, assuming, how is he able to give and not hold back? How is the righteous able to do that?
He has something. Himself, who he is as a man, and then what he's earned in the past.
That's right. Yeah. He has something to give. You can't give what you don't have. Presumably, he has worked hard. Right? You see that? The righteous has worked hard, made good decisions. He's been wise. And so what does he do? He gives. He's able to be generous because he has more than he needs. Be a great crank turner. Be a producer. That's one of the things that men specifically, as opposed to women, are called to do. To be a great provider. Do that so that you can be generous. It has to do with hospitality. You can't be hospitable if you ain't got anything to give, right? If you're constantly measuring what everybody's drinking at the house and making sure that, don't put too much on your plate, quit. Provide enough that as God gives you opportunity to do that. The sluggard, what is he doing? Must be nice to have that. Well, get off your butt, sucker. Get moving, right? That's the idea. The sluggard's desire is his death. He wants the wrong thing. He refuses to work. He gives up, makes excuses at every turn. On the other hand, the righteous has enough to be generous and share with others. Be a producer, be generous, and be hospitable. Moving on, verse 13. I know we're kind of going back and forth on some of these. Verse 13. Talk about stingy people. What does it mean to be stingy?
Sharing.
Yeah.
Should be a sin.
Yeah. He who shuts his ear to the outcry of the poor will also call and not be answered. He who sees people who are in genuine need. We've talked about this before, different classes of poor people, right? There are some who are poor because they're sluggards, right? And Proverbs has a lot to say about that. There are some people who are poor because they're exploited by the rich or by conniving evil people. And there are some people who are poor because they've just had a bad lot in life and bad things have happened to them. And, their house burned down or, particularly the Bible talks about widows and orphans, people whose provider is absent for whatever reason, whether he was a sorry dog or he died. Okay. And so, here you just get this idea. What does it say? He who shuts his ear to the outcry of the poor, he will also call and not be answered. You're going to need something one day, and you're going to cry out to God, and what's God going to say? Sorry about you. Nothing. Sorry about you. Yeah, nothing. People who are tight-fisted misers will be dealt with by others and by God in similar fashion. Those who don't realize that God gave them the abilities and the insight that they have in order to work and be producers and don't give thanks for that and hoard it for themselves, what's going to happen? God will bring those people to a ruin. You see also Luke 6:38, Jesus says, give and it'll be given to you. I'll pour into your lap with a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. It's the idea that you got this basket and you think, oh, the basket's full. And what does he say? No, give it a shake. All right, we're going to put some more in there. And you say, well, that's enough. And he says, no. Get some, push it down in there. Right? Let's get some more in there. Right? It's this idea that God blesses his children phenomenally. Right? He does that. And this is not some kind of prosperity gospel BS or something like that. But it does mean that what does God do? He gives men abilities and opportunities. You take advantage of those things and do all the things that we've talked about previous to this, doing it righteously and all that. And Jesus says, he gives his sons good gifts. He loves his people. He's not trying to hold out on you or something like that. How is it that Jesus says, if you know how to give good gifts to your kids, if your kid asks you for something to eat, you don't give him a snake. He says bread, right? You don't give him a snake. Why would you do that, right? He says God knows how to do that. God gives good gifts to his children. The standard for New Testament giving is 2 Corinthians 9. 2 Corinthians 9, you ought to have that in your head. We're not going to read that because it's a fairly lengthy passage. 2 Corinthians 9, 6 through 15. Paul is... if you've been with us in Acts on Sunday morning, he's telling the Corinthians about a gift. As he came through Macedonia, they're going to take this gift to the church at Jerusalem and giving to others and helping them out. And he praises them on one hand for what they want to do, and then also basically tells them to excel in that idea. And so stingy people will be dealt with stingily. That's not actually a word, right? But how is it that God is gonna deal with people who are that doesn't mean, by the way, that you flaunt resources or that you just you're flippant about resources. See also our discussion last week about giving money to the guy on the corner. My general advice is just don't do that. Right? That's a bad idea. We give money to people and organizations that we know, that we have vetted, that we have a relationship with, and things like that. But another thing to think about with this is that what is the antidote? Articulation matters. What is the antidote to greed? How do you not be greedy?
Give.
Generosity, yeah. Being generous. Understanding that it's all God's, right? And whether you have a little or a lot. Remember the widow's mite, right? What did she do? She gave everything she had, right? And so you want to be a good steward, stewardship, the ownership of God, all these things kind of come into play with all this. And so, again, we're talking about motives and what is it that you love? What is your desire? Let's look verse 3. This one's really good. To do righteousness and justice It's chosen by the Lord over sacrifice. In the Old Testament, what did God told them to do? Well, when you have certain sacrifices at certain times of the year, there's an annual sacrifice. There were certain sins that you had to bring a sacrifice for to atone for it. You'll remember in the book of Judges, it talked about. Look back at verse 2, actually. Let's look at verse 2 first. I kind of messed this up a little bit, sorry. Every man's way is right in his own eyes, but Yahweh weighs the hearts. Every man's way is right in his own eyes. People can justify anything. But what does it say? God sees. He weighs the hearts. He knows what's right. I'll refer you to the book of Judges. What's the refrain in the book of Judges? Every man did what was right in his own eyes. That's the key part to that. In his own eyes. We've all had this experience. You go talk to people. Well, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't know why I keep talking about sex today, but consenting adults. Who cares? Nobody's hurt or something like that. Well, it doesn't matter what you think, right? I don't think it's, lying's not necessarily bad if it accomplishes good or something like that. And certainly there are nuances to things and things like that. But there are some things that are just flat out wrong, and it's just wrong, all right? And so what does it say? To do right in your own eyes, well, you're not the judge. I'm not the judge. We have to look at what the judge says. But beyond that, verse 3, to do righteousness and justice is to be chosen by Yahweh over sacrifice. So people say, well, I'm going to go through my religious do's and don'ts. I'm going to go to church and I'm going to give and I do all that. But you're going to be a sorry, no good SOB? No. Doesn't work that way, buddy. Right? We all know people that don't go to church because of hypocrites, and that, in fact, they themselves are hypocrites, and that's a cop-out, right? But there are certainly have been and are people that have all the appearances of religiosity with no righteousness. That's a problem. Jesus has extremely harsh things to say in Matthew 23 to the Pharisees. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, he says. You strain out a gnat and you swallow a camel. Think about the imagery of that. You strain out a gnat and you swallow. You neglect the weightier things of the law. There are those who say that, all sin is sin and it's all the same. Well, it's true that all sin is sin, but not all sin is equally sinful. Certainly we recognize that, right? Jesus says to be angry with your brother, and call him, say to him, raka or fool, and to murder him, you've committed murder in your heart. Or if you look upon a woman with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. He's not saying that, well, since you've committed lust, you might as well go ahead and fornicate and then lead on to adultery. That's not what he said. Those are not the same thing. It's not the same thing. The motive behind it, that's the path you're on. That's what's being communicated. And so in the scriptures, there are things that are weightier, that matter more. Does God want religious duty about certain things and want things to be done a certain way? We, us in the Reformed tradition, we're kind of sticklers about how worship is done, and there are some things about that. Does that stuff matter? Yes, it matters. Okay, and it matters a lot. Just like sacrifices mattered a lot. They really did. Like God told them to do that. And if they didn't do that, that would be sin for them to not do what God told them to do. However, which was more important? The sacrifice or the weightier things that Jesus says of justice and mercy? To love the truth. To have a bigger picture. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 22, he says Saul had not done what God told him to do, essentially, and the retort is obedience is better than sacrifice. Obedience is better than sacrifice. So don't let your religion and your religious duties, don't think that you're righteous. Don't be self-righteous. Jesus says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You tithe of your mint, dill, and cumin, and have neglected the weightier provisions of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These things you should have done without neglecting the other. You should have practiced the former without neglecting the latter. It's both and. It's not one or the other. People don't understand some things that some things are more important in God's law. Those that think that way don't understand the scriptures. We've talked about examples. Lastly, we'll close on this because we're out of time. Wives. You thought I was going to skip it? I'm not. Verse 9 and 19, real quick. These are kind of funny. We'll read them. Verse 9. It is better to live in the corner of a roof than to share a house with a contentious woman. Verse 19. It's better to live in a desert land than with a contentious and vexing woman. Kind of saying the same thing in a little different way. One is in the corner of a roof. Well, what's so bad about the corner of a roof? The look on Bobby's face. If you ever climbed around a roof, that corner, man, I used to do low voltage cabling, like you're running wires and stuff. And I can remember, like, you're trying to drill a hole in the cap of this ring. You're like, it's hot and you're trying. That was awful, right? It's just terrible. And of course, back in their time, they didn't have fiberglass insulation. I mean, we make it even worse today, right? Better to live in the corner of a roof than with a contentious woman. Constantly, right? Just, right? This is a funny one that my wife and I talk about a lot, right? I give her a hard time about it sometimes, right? And we, if you're picking a wife, don't get one that's going to be constantly fighting with you. We don't think we got any single guys. We got one. Basically, verse 19 says basically the same thing, but substitutes desert for a roof. I also told my daughters, don't be like this. Like, we've talked about this. There's a way to help your man without dripping on him constantly. There's a way of helping your man without dripping on him constantly. And so it's funny. Again, we kind of joke about it, but I'm thankful that God's given me a wife who tries to help me and does most of the time when I will let her. That's part of the problem sometimes. What's contentious? She's always fighting. It talks about a vexing woman. She's just making you mad all the time. It's like you don't want to pick a woman who's just going to constantly fight with you. And if you've already got one and she's constantly fighting with you, then you need to have some talks about how to deal with that. There are ways of moving forward with that which go beyond our discussion, and we're out of time. So, let's pray together. Father, help us to walk in faithfulness and wisdom. Help us to trust you with the outcomes that are beyond our control or authority. Help us to be men of sound judgment, being able to sift through the people and circumstances well. We pray that as we become older, we'd become more righteous, wise, and valuable to the kingdom. And we thank you and pray for our wives. Give the single men godly wives. We invite your Spirit to lead us and teach us. In Jesus' name, amen.